When the heart monitor flatlined for 8 seconds, I saw my entire life flash before me. But what hurt most wasn't dying. It was realizing my only son wouldn't even come to say goodbye. The nurses said I was lucky to survive, but as I lay there alone in that sterile room, listening to machines beep where my son's voice should have been, I wondered if luck had anything to do with it at all. My name is Molly Hayes, and this is the story of how I lost everything, including myself, only to find something far more valuable than I ever imagined. For 58 years, I thought I understood what it meant to be a mother. I believed that love was simple. You give everything you have, sacrifice everything you are, and your children grow up knowing they were cherished. I raised my son Daniel the way my mother raised me, with discipline, structure, and unwavering expectations. When his father left us when Daniel was only 7, I became both parents. I worked 2 jobs to keep him in the best school district. I missed countless hours of sleep reviewing his homework, attending every parent-teacher conference, making sure he had every opportunity one never did. Daniel grew up to be exactly what I'd hoped for, a successful corporate attorney in Manhattan, married to a beautiful woman named Rachel, father to my 2 granddaughters, Emma and Sophie. From the outside, we looked like the American dream realized across 2 generations. A single mother who'd pulled herself up, and a son who'd made it even further. But somewhere along the way, in all that striving and achieving, we'd lost something essential. We'd lost each other. I didn't see it happening. Or maybe I did, and I told myself it was normal. That's what grown children do, right? They move away. They get busy with their own lives. The weekly phone calls became monthly check-ins. The Sunday dinners became holiday obligations. The warmth in Daniel's voice when he said, "Hi, Mom," gradually cooled into something polite but distant, like he was talking to a respected colleague rather than the woman who'd given him life. I told myself it was fine. I told myself this was what success looked like. My son didn't need me anymore because I'd done my job well. He was independent, self-sufficient, thriving. Isn't that what every mother wants? The chest pain started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my garden, planting the tomatoes I grew every year, when suddenly it felt like an elephant was sitting on my ribcage. The pain radiated down my left arm, and I knew, you always know, that this was serious. I managed to call 911 before I collapsed onto the soil I'd just been turning, my face pressed against the earth that smelled like spring and possibility. The ambulance ride was a blur. The emergency room was chaos. Doctors used words like myocardial infarction and critical condition, and we need to operate immediately. They asked who to contact, and I gave them Daniel's number with absolute certainty that my son would come. He had to come. I was his mother. I was dying. The surgery took 6 hours. When I woke up in the ICU, my chest felt like it had been cracked open, which of course, it had been. Tubes ran from my arms, monitors beeped steadily, and a nurse with kind eyes told me I was lucky to be alive. The damage to my heart had been severe. Another 10 minutes and I wouldn't have made it. "Is my son here?" Those were the first words I managed to whisper. The nurse's smile faltered just slightly. "Let me check with the front desk, honey." She came back 20 minutes later with that same practiced kindness, and I knew the answer before she spoke. "He called," she said gently. "He said he's tied up with a major case but he'll try to visit soon." Try to visit soon? I'd almost died, and my son would try to visit soon. I nodded because what else could I do? The nurse patted my hand and left me alone with the machines and the crushing weight of a different kind of heartbreak, one no surgery could repair. That first night in the ICU was the longest of my life. Every hour, a nurse came to check my vitals, but between those visits, I was alone with my thoughts and the quiet understanding that something was profoundly broken. Not just in my heart's left ventricle, but in the fundamental fabric of my relationship with my son. I kept checking my phone. Surely he'd call. Surely he'd text. Surely the man I'd raised, the boy I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through fevers and cheered through every milestone, would find a way to at least reach out. The phone stayed silent. On the second day, Rachel called. My daughter-in-law's voice was strained, apologetic. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. Daniel is absolutely swamped with this murder case. You know how he gets when work is intense. But we're thinking of you. The girls made you a card." I'll mail it tomorrow. Rachel, I said, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd only recently removed. I had a heart attack. I almost died. I know, and we're so grateful you're okay. Daniel was so relieved when the hospital called with the update. He's under tremendous pressure right now. This case could make his career. And his mother dying could apparently wait. After she hung up, I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them over and over because it was better than counting the hours my son had chosen not to come. 27 tiles. I counted them 43 times that day. Other patients had visitors. I could hear them through the thin curtains, family members crying with relief, friends bringing flowers, children saying, "I love you, get better soon." The woman in the bed next to mine had so many people crowding around her that the nurses had to enforce the visitor limit. Her daughter was there every single day, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair, helping her to the bathroom, combing her hair. I had no one. Well, that's not entirely true. I had Jennifer, my neighbor from 3 doors down, who came on the 3rd day with a container of homemade soup and genuine concern in her eyes. I had my friend Patricia from book club, who stopped by with magazines and gossip and didn't mention Daniel's absence, even though I could see the questions in her eyes. I had kindness from near strangers, but my own son, the person who should have mattered most, remained conspicuously absent. A week passed, then another. I was moved from the ICU to a regular room, and the doctors started talking about cardiac rehabilitation and lifestyle changes, and the long road to recovery ahead. Through it all, Daniel sent texts. Brief, clinical texts that felt like they'd been drafted by his legal assistant. Glad the surgery went well. Rest up, Mom. Sorry I can't make it this weekend. Trial prep. Rachel said your color is better. Good news. Not once did he call. Not once did he actually ask how I was feeling, what I was scared of, whether I needed anything. Not once did he show up. On day 14, something inside me shifted. I was doing my required walking laps around the cardiac floor, slow, shuffling circles dragging my 4-pole, when I passed a woman sobbing on the phone. She wasn't even a patient. She was visiting her father. But I heard her say through tears, "I know we haven't spoken in years, Dad, but I'm here now. I'm sorry it took almost losing you to make me realize how much time we've wasted." I stopped walking, stood there in my hospital gown and non-slip socks, and something crystallized in my mind with absolute clarity. Daniel wasn't coming. Not because he was too busy. Not because his case was too important. But because somewhere in the years of my pushing and his achieving, we'd built a wall between us brick by brick, and neither of us knew how to tear it down. Or maybe he just didn't want to. That realization didn't make me sad. It made me angry. Furiously, righteously angry in a way I hadn't felt in decades. I'd given this child everything, my youth, my dreams, my energy, my money, my time, my heart. And when I needed him most, when I was lying in a hospital bed with a chest full of staples and a future full of uncertainty, he couldn't even be bothered to show his face. I shuffled back to my room, and for the first time since the heart attack, my mind felt sharp and clear. The fog of pain medication and trauma lifted, and I could see with brutal honesty what I'd been avoiding for years. I had failed as a mother. Not because I hadn't loved Daniel enough, but because I'd loved him wrong. I'd been so focused on making him successful that I'd forgotten to make sure he was kind. I'd emphasized achievement over empathy, ambition over connection. I'd raised a man who knew how to win cases, but not how to show up for the woman who'd given him life. And I'd enabled it. Every time he canceled dinner because of work, I'd said I understand. Every time he cut a phone call short, I'd said go ahead, you're busy. Every time he chose something else over me, I'd smiled and nodded and told him it was fine because I didn't want to be the needy mother, the burden, the guilt trip. But it wasn't fine. None of it was fine. That night, I asked the nurse for paper and a pen. My hands shook from weakness, from anger, from something like grief, but I started writing. Not a letter. Something else entirely. I wrote down everything I owned. My house, the modest 3-bedroom colonial I'd bought with my divorce settlement and 30 years of mortgage payments. My retirement accounts. My savings. My car. My mother's jewelry. The life insurance policy. Every asset I'd spent a lifetime accumulating, every security I'd built for my future. And then I started making changes. I called my lawyer, not Daniel of course, but Margaret Whitmore, a woman I'd met through a friend who specialized in estate planning. She came to the hospital the next day, tablet in hand and no judgment in her eyes. "Margaret," she said carefully after I'd outlined what I wanted to do, "are you sure about this? You're still recovering. Maybe you should wait until..." "Until what?" I interrupted. "Until I have another heart attack and don't survive it? Until my son finally decides I'm worth his time? I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's make sure everything is exactly as you want it." Over the next week, while I continued my recovery, we worked. Margaret came every afternoon, and we went through every detail with meticulous care. I was surprised by how calm I felt, how clear-headed. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. This was taking control of the one thing I had left, my own choices, my own legacy, my own voice. Daniel sent another text during that time. "Wrapping up the case next week. I'll try to stop by if you're still in the hospital." If I'm still in the hospital. As if I were lounging around for fun. I didn't respond. 3 weeks after my heart attack, the doctors finally cleared me to go home. Rachel offered to pick me up. Daniel was in depositions all day, but I declined. Jennifer drove me instead, helped me into my house, made sure I had groceries and my medications organized. "You call me if you need anything," she said, squeezing my hand at the door. "Day or night, Margaret." "I mean it." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than she could know. This woman who owed me nothing had given me more care than my own son. The house felt different when I was alone in it. Quieter. Emptier. I walked through the room slowly, still weak, seeing everything with new eyes. Daniel's childhood bedroom, which I'd kept exactly as he'd left it, like a shrine to the boy he used to be. The photos on every wall chronicling his achievements, academic awards, basketball trophies, graduation pictures, his wedding day. My whole house was a monument to my son's life, with barely a trace of my own. When had I become just Daniel's mother and nothing else? I sat in my living room that night, in the chair by the window where I'd rocked Daniel as a baby, and I let myself cry for the first time since the heart attack. Not from physical pain, but from the deep, aching loss of illusions. I'd thought I was building a life. Instead, I'd been erasing myself one sacrifice at a time. Daniel finally visited 4 weeks after my heart attack. He showed up on a Saturday afternoon, still in his business casual clothes, checking his watch before he'd even fully stepped through the door. "Hey Mom," he said, giving me a quick, awkward hug that barely qualified as contact. "You look good. Better than I expected." Better than he expected. Based on what? The imagination he'd used since he hadn't actually seen me? "Come in," I said calmly. "Sit down." He sat on the edge of the couch, still checking his phone, already halfway out the door mentally. "I can't stay long. Rachel's got this thing tonight, and I promised I'd." "Daniel," I said quietly. "Look at me." Something in my voice made him stop. He looked up, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of unease cross his face. Maybe he saw something different in my eyes. Maybe he sensed that something fundamental had shifted. "I almost died," I said. "Do you understand that? The doctors said if I'd been alone another 10 minutes, I would have died on my garden floor with dirt under my fingernails and no one to hold my hand." "Mom, I know. And I'm sorry I couldn't get away sooner, but this case was..." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. We both know you could have come. Maybe not the first day, but certainly by the second or third. You chose not to. So let's not pretend this was about work." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The expectations. I'm up for partner this year and I'm your mother," I said. "I had a heart attack. I was alone in a hospital wondering if I was going to die, and you were choosing partnership over me. It's not that simple. Isn't it?" I leaned forward, ignoring the pull in my chest. "Tell me, Daniel. When did I become so optional to you? When did I stop mattering?" He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "You're being dramatic. You're fine now. And I'm here, aren't I? For weeks later, after it doesn't matter anymore. We sat in silence for a moment. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to end this conversation, how to escape back to his real life where I was just a checkbox on his to-do list. I don't want to fight with you, he finally said. I came to see how you're doing. Can't we just? I changed my will, I said quietly. He blinked. What? While I was in the hospital, I had my lawyer come visit. I changed my will, my beneficiaries, all of it. Now I had his full attention. His phone lay forgotten in his lap, and he was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I spent 58 years building a life, and when I looked at it from that hospital bed, I realized I'd built it all for someone who couldn't even be bothered to show up when I needed him. So I made some changes. Changes, he repeated slowly. What kind of changes? I smiled, and it felt strange on my face, not bitter, not angry, but something like liberation. You'll find out eventually, when it matters. Are you seriously doing this right now? His voice rose slightly. You're guilt-tripping me about your will because I couldn't drop everything for a hospital visit? It wasn't a visit, Daniel. It was your mother dying. And yes, you should have dropped everything. That's what love does. It shows up. It sits in uncomfortable chairs. It holds hands and brings soup and says, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here until the person knows they're not alone. I sent flowers, he said weakly. You sent your assistant to order flowers, I corrected. I got the card. It said thinking of you, and was signed with your name in a font, not your handwriting. You didn't even write it yourself. He stood up abruptly. I don't need this. I came here to check on you, and you're attacking me. I have a life, Mom. I have responsibilities. I can't just drop everything every time you need something. I had a heart attack, I said again, staying seated, staying calm. I almost died. That's not needing something. That's needing someone. And you weren't there. Because I was working. Because I was trying to secure my family's future. Because unlike you, I actually have people depending on me. The words hung in the air like poison. We both heard them. We both understood what he'd revealed in that moment of anger, that he saw me as alone, as no one, as someone without value because I didn't have people depending on me the way he did. Get out, I said softly. Mom. Get out of my house, Daniel. And don't come back until you understand what you just said to me. He left. Didn't apologize, didn't take it back. Just grabbed his keys and walked out. And I heard his car start up and drive away, taking with it any remaining illusion I'd had about our relationship. I sat alone in that quiet house and felt strangely at peace. The next few months were a revelation. I threw myself into cardiac rehab with an intensity that surprised my physical therapist. I walked every day, first just around the block, then farther still. I joined a support group for heart attack survivors, and found a community of people who understood what it meant to look death in the face, and have to rebuild your life afterward. I started volunteering at the hospital, doing the kind of simple things that had meant so much to me, delivering flowers, sitting with patients who had no visitors, being the hand to hold and the voice that said, you're not alone. I found purpose in showing up for strangers the way my own son hadn't shown up for me. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected. I took a painting class I'd always been interested in. I adopted a rescue dog named Sadie who slept on my bed and followed me from room to room, and loved me with the kind of uncomplicated devotion I'd once thought I had with Daniel. I became slowly and surprisingly happy. Not despite my son's absence, but maybe a little bit because of it. Without the constant low-grade anxiety of trying to maintain a relationship that only I was invested in, I had energy for other things. For myself. For a life that was mine, not just an extension of being Daniel's mother. He called once about 6 weeks after our fight. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Mom, he said, and his voice sounded strained. I wanted to apologize. What I said was out of line. Yes, it was. A pause. So, are we okay? No, Daniel. We're not okay. But we might be someday, if you're willing to do the work. What work? Mom, I said I was sorry. Sorry is a start. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't show up. If you want a relationship with me, you need to decide if I actually matter to you, or if I'm just someone you check on out of obligation. That's not fair. Life rarely is, I said. But those are my terms. Think about it. He didn't call back. Autumn came, then winter. The holidays approached, and for the first time in Daniel's life, I didn't automatically plan to spend them with him. Rachel called, tentative and uncomfortable. Margaret, what are we doing for Thanksgiving? You're doing whatever you'd like, I said pleasantly. I'll be volunteering at the soup kitchen, and then having dinner with some friends. Oh. A long pause. Daniel thought you'd want to come here. Did he invite me? Well, I'm inviting you now. That's kind, Rachel, but I have plans. Give my love to the girls. Christmas was the same. I sent gifts for Emma and Sophie, but I didn't offer to host, didn't offer to come over. I didn't punish anyone. I simply stopped making my life revolve around a son who'd made clear I wasn't a priority in his. And I was okay. More than okay. I was discovering who Margaret Hayes was when she wasn't defined solely by motherhood. And I liked the woman I was finding. In January, almost a year after my heart attack, Daniel showed up at my door unannounced. He looked different, tired, thinner, older somehow. Can I come in? He asked. I studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. He walked into my living room and stopped, looking around with visible confusion. You redecorated. I did. I'd taken down most of the photos of him, replaced them with my own paintings and pictures from my travels and life outside of motherhood. His shrine of a bedroom had become my art studio. It's so different, he said, and he sounded almost lost. I'm different, I said simply. Would you like some tea? We sat across from each other, and for the first time in memory, Daniel seemed uncertain. He held his teacup without drinking, looking into it like it might have answers. Rachel and I are in counseling, he said finally. She said I'm not present, that I prioritize work over family, that I'm becoming my father. He looked up at me. That hit hard. You know how much I hated how Dad left us. And yet you left me lying in a hospital bed, I said quietly. Different method, same abandonment. He flinched. I know. I've been thinking about it all year. I told myself I was busy, that you'd understand, that it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal, wasn't it? It was everything, Daniel. It showed me exactly where I stood in your list of priorities. I'm sorry, he said, and this time his voice cracked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know when I became this person. When I started measuring everything by success and career, and what other people think. Rachel says I'm so focused on making partner that I've forgotten what actually matters. And she's right. What changed? I asked. Why now? He was quiet for a long time. Emma asked me why you weren't at Christmas. And I realized I didn't have a good answer. I said you were busy and she said, but Grandma always comes. Did you make her sad? And I couldn't lie to her. I told her the truth. That I'd hurt you. That I'd been a bad son. And she looked at me with this disappointment on her face, and I saw how she was learning from me. How I was teaching her that it's okay to neglect people you love if you're busy enough. Children learn what we show them, I said. I don't want to teach her that. I don't want to be the man who missed his mother's heart attack for a case I can barely remember now. I don't want to be my father. Then don't be, I said. You have a choice, Daniel. Every day you have a choice. He set down his teacup and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know about the will. Rachel made me think about what it meant. Not the money, I don't care about that. But the fact that you changed it. That you looked at your life and decided I didn't deserve to be part of your legacy. That's what killed me. I didn't do it to punish you. I know. That's what makes it worse. You did it because it was true. Because I hadn't earned it. We sat in silence. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, soft and quiet. What was in the will? He asked finally. What did you change? I smiled. That's not the right question. What is? The right question is, what kind of son do you want to be? What kind of father? What kind of man? The will doesn't matter, Daniel. It's just money and things. What matters is whether you show up. Whether you choose the people you love over the things that feel urgent, but aren't actually important. I want to be better, he said, and his eyes were wet. I want to be the son you deserved. I know I can't take back last year, but I want to do better now. Then do better, I said. Not with words. With actions. With time. With presence. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Can I start now? Can I take you to lunch? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw both the man he'd become and the boy he used to be. Saw his flaws and his potential, his failings and his willingness to try. And I made a choice too. I'd like that, I said. That lunch turned into a weekly dinner. Slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding. Daniel showed up, actually showed up, not just physically but emotionally. He asked questions and listened to answers. He brought the girls to visit and stayed, participating instead of checking his phone. He called just to talk, not because he needed something. It wasn't perfect. We had setbacks. Old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But the difference was that now, when I pointed them out, he acknowledged them. He apologized. He adjusted. And I learned too. I learned to have a life outside of being his mother. To maintain the boundaries I'd set. To value my own time and energy. And to understand that love doesn't mean erasing yourself. 6 months after Daniel showed up at my door in January, on a warm summer evening, he brought his family over for dinner. After we ate, after the girls had gone to play in the yard with Sadie, after Rachel had tactfully taken her coffee to the porch, Daniel handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it." Inside was a card, handwritten, not printed. Inside the card was a check made out to the cardiac wing of the hospital where I'd spent those lonely weeks, and it was for a substantial amount. "Daniel, what?" "It's in your name," he said. "The Margaret Hayes Heart Recovery Fund. For patients who don't have family support. So they can have someone to sit with them, help them with rehab, make sure they're not alone. Like you did for me, even when I didn't deserve it." I stared at the check, at his handwriting, at the gesture that showed he'd finally understood. Not just with his head, but with his heart. "I can't change the past," he said quietly. "I can't go back and be there when you needed me. But I can honor who you were for me, and who you've become. This is just the beginning, Mom. I want to do more. I want to make sure that the legacy you leave isn't about what happened to us, but about what you did for others." "Daniel," I whispered and my voice broke. "I love you, Mom. I should have said it more. I should have shown it better. But I'm saying it now, and I'm going to keep saying it, and I'm going to make sure you never doubt it again." We sat together on my porch as the sun set, watching Emma and Sophie play with Sadie, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not hope that everything would magically be fixed, but hope that we were on the right path. That the work we were both doing mattered. That night, after they left, I pulled out the will. The one I'd spent so many hours crafting in that hospital bed. I read through it again, remembering the pain and anger and clarity that had driven me to make those changes. The next day, I called Margaret Whitmore. "I'd like to make some amendments," I said. "Of course. What would you like to change?" I thought about Daniel showing up every week. About him bringing the girls to spend real time with me. About him finally understanding that love is a verb, an action, a choice you make every single day. "I want to establish a trust," I said, "for my granddaughter's education. And I want to restore Daniel as a primary beneficiary, but with conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "He has to continue therapy. He has to maintain our weekly dinners. He has to stay present. And if he doesn't, if he slides back into who he was, everything goes to charity instead." "That's actually very wise," Margaret said. "You're not just giving him a gift. You're giving him accountability." "I'm giving him a reason to keep choosing us," I said. "Because that's what changed me, not the heart attack, but the choice I made afterward to stop accepting less than I deserved." A year later, I had another scare, not a heart attack, but enough chest pain to send me to the emergency room. Daniel was there in 20 minutes. He held my hand through the tests, talked to the doctors, stayed until they'd determined it was just anxiety and muscle strain. He didn't leave until I was home and settled, and he called me every day that week to check in. "I'm fine," I told him the 4th time he called. "I know," he said. I'm calling anyway. That's when I knew we'd made it. Not because he showed up for the emergency, but because he showed up for the ordinary. Because he called when nothing was wrong. Because he chose me not out of guilt or obligation, but out of love. 2 years after my heart attack, on a crisp October afternoon, Daniel brought me to the hospital for an unveiling. They'd used his donation, combined with fundraising from others, to create a beautiful space in the cardiac wing, a room with comfortable chairs, warm lighting, books and puzzles and art supplies, where patients recovering from heart procedures could have visitors in a space that felt less clinical, more human. On the wall was a plaque, the Margaret Hayes Heart Recovery Room, because no one should heal alone. I stood there reading it, my hand pressed to my chest, not from pain, but from the overwhelming fullness of it. From the knowledge that my pain had become someone else's comfort. That my loneliness had created connection for others. Did I do good, Mom? Daniel asked, and his voice was uncertain in a way that reminded me of the little boy he used to be, showing me his report card. You did better than good, I said. You turned something broken into something beautiful. Later, when we were sitting in that new room with its comfortable chairs and soft lighting, Daniel said something I'll never forget. I used to think you were weak, he said quietly. All that sacrificing for me. I thought it meant you didn't have anything else, anyone else. I thought you needed me more than I needed you, and I resented it. And now? I asked. Now I understand that sacrifice is love. That you gave me everything not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to choose me every day. And when I didn't choose you back, when I failed you, you were strong enough to demand better. You saved yourself, Mom. And in doing that, you taught me how to save myself too. We saved each other, I said. That's what family does when they get it right. So what did I leave my son in that will? The one I wrote from my hospital bed with shaking hands and a broken heart. What was the thing he'd never forget? It wasn't money, though that was part of it. It wasn't my house or my jewelry or any material thing. It was a letter, 47 pages long, written over those weeks of recovery and realization. A letter that said everything I'd never said, not just about my disappointment and hurt, but about my love, about my failures as a mother, about the ways I'd enabled his distance, about my hopes for him, about my forgiveness. A letter that ended with these words. You are my son, and I will always love you. But love is not enough. Love without presence is just a word. Love without action is just air. I'm leaving you this letter so you'll know that I loved you enough to tell you the truth, even when it hurt. I loved you enough to stop accepting less than you were capable of giving. I loved you enough to let you experience the consequences of your choices. And I loved you enough to believe you could become better than you were. Don't mourn me with guilt, Daniel. Honor me with change. Show up for the people you love. Choose presence over prestige. Remember that at the end of your life, no one will remember the cases you won or the partnership you made, but they will remember whether you were there. Whether you loved them not just in word, but in deed. That is my legacy to you. Use it well. He read that letter after Margaret Whitmore sent it to him, per my instructions, on the anniversary of my heart attack. He read it, and he called me crying, and he asked if it was too late to become the son I'd described. I told him it was never too late. That's what I'd learned in that hospital bed. It's never too late to choose differently, to be better, to reclaim your power and your voice and your life. Today, I'm 61 years old. My heart has a scar, but it's strong. I see my son every week. I have a relationship with my granddaughters that's built on consistent presence, not just birthday cards. I have a life that's mine, full of art and volunteering and friends and purpose. And I have the peace that comes from knowing I didn't take my disappointment to the grave. I spoke it. I changed it. I refused to live in silent sacrifice anymore. Did I do the right thing, changing that will? Demanding better? Walking away when my son couldn't show up for me? Some people might say I was too harsh, too unforgiving. That family should come first, always, no matter what. But I think family does come first, only if they choose to be family. Only if they show up. Only if they do the work. I think the greatest love we can show someone is to refuse to enable their worst self. To demand they rise to meet their best self instead. My son refused to visit my hospital bed. But what I left him wasn't something he'd forget. It was something that changed him. Changed us both. It was the truth, spoken in love but without apology. It was accountability wrapped in hope. It was the final, most important lesson I could teach him. That love without presence is hollow, but presence without love is impossible. The real gift I gave my son wasn't an inheritance. It was a mirror. I showed him who he'd become, and I gave him the space to decide if that was who he wanted to be. Most importantly, I showed him that it was possible to change, because I'd changed too. I'd stopped being the mother who accepted crumbs and called it a feast. I'd become a woman who knew her worth, who demanded respect, who understood that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was essential. And you know what? That's a lesson every one of us needs to learn, whether we're parents or children, givers or takers, the ones waiting by the phone or the ones too busy to call. There's something I want you to understand if you've made it this far in my story. If you're sitting there thinking about someone in your life who takes you for granted, who treats you like an option instead of a priority, who assumes you'll always be there no matter how little they give back, listen to me carefully. You deserve better. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve presence, not just promises. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to stop accepting less than your worth. I almost died before I learned that lesson. Don't wait for a heart attack to wake you up. Don't wait until you're lying in a hospital bed counting ceiling tiles and wondering when you became invisible. Don't spend another year, another month, another day making yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. The gift I gave Daniel was painful. It cost him his comfort, his assumptions, his excuses. But it gave him something infinitely more valuable. The chance to become a man he could be proud of. A father his daughters could respect. A son who understood that love is a verb, an action, a daily choice. And the gift I gave myself? That was even more important. I gave myself permission to matter. Permission to have needs and express them. Permission to walk away from relationships that diminished me, even when those relationships were supposed to be sacred. Permission to build a life that wasn't just about serving others, but about becoming fully myself. I think about that woman I was, lying in that hospital bed with a cracked open chest and a broken heart, feeling invisible and forgotten. I want to reach back through time and hold her hand. I want to tell her that the pain she's feeling isn't the end of her story, it's the beginning. That she's about to discover a strength she never knew she had. That she's about to become someone she'll actually recognize in the mirror, someone she'll learn to love. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know then. You can't love others well until you love yourself enough to demand better. You can't teach your children about healthy relationships if you're modeling self-erasure. You can't give from an empty cup, and you can't expect people to value what you give them if you don't value it yourself. My heart attack saved my life in more ways than one. Yes, the surgery repaired the physical damage. But the real healing happened when I decided I was worth showing up for. When I decided that my time, my energy, my love, and my presence had value, and that anyone who wanted access to those things needed to treat them with respect. Does that make me selfish? Some people might think so. Some people might say a mother's love should be unconditional, that I should have just kept accepting whatever scraps Daniel was willing to throw my way, that I should have been grateful he called at all. But I disagree. I think unconditional love means I love Daniel no matter what. It doesn't mean I have to accept poor treatment no matter what. I think the most unconditional thing I did was love him enough to let him face the consequences of his choices. Love him enough to believe he could do better. Love him enough to stop enabling his worst tendencies. I gave him the space to grow by refusing to shrink anymore. Now when I look at my son, I see a man who's still imperfect. We all are, but who's trying. Really trying. Who shows up even when it's inconvenient. Who calls even when he's busy. Who has learned that the people you love aren't checkboxes on a to-do list. They're the whole point of everything else you do. Last week, Emma, my oldest granddaughter, had a school play. She was a tree in the forest scene, not even a speaking role, just standing there with her arms up like branches. Daniel not only went to the play, he left work early to be there for the pre-show photos. He sat in those tiny school chairs and clapped louder than anyone else. And afterward, when Emma ran up to him glowing with pride, he picked her up and said, "You were the best tree I've ever seen." He told me later that as he sat there watching her, he suddenly remembered his own school plays. How I'd been at every single one, sitting in those same tiny chairs, clapping just as loud. How he'd taken it for granted that I would always be there, had never once thanked me for rearranging my work schedule, or skipping lunch to make it happen. I finally got it, Mom, he said. I finally understood what you did for me, and what it meant when I didn't do the same for you. That's the inheritance I really left him. Not money or property, but understanding, empathy, the ability to see beyond his own needs and recognize the quiet sacrifices of love. These days my calendar is full, not with obligations I resent, but with choices I celebrate. Tuesday mornings, I volunteer at the hospital's recovery room, the one that bears my name. Wednesday afternoons, I take an art class with 3 other women who've become dear friends. Thursdays, Daniel brings the girls over for dinner, and we cook together. All 4 generations of women in my little kitchen, teaching Sophie and Emma how to make my mother's recipes while Sadie begs for scraps at our feet. Fridays are mine alone, a luxury I never allowed myself before. I read, I paint, I garden. I sit in my chair by the window and simply exist without having to be anything to anyone. And it feels sacred. On Saturdays, I often have lunch with other women from my support group, heart attack survivors who understand what it means to have your mortality suddenly become real, to have to rebuild your life from the inside out. We laugh more than you'd expect. We've learned that surviving death gives you permission to really live, to stop wasting time on things that don't matter. And Sundays I spend with my found family, the neighbors and friends who showed up when I needed them, who proved that blood isn't the only thing that makes someone family. Jennifer and her husband come over for afternoon coffee. Patricia from book club stops by with her latest recommendations. We sit on my porch and talk about everything and nothing, and I feel held by this web of connection I've woven. Daniel is part of this life now, but he's not the center of it. He's one important thread in a tapestry that's much larger, much richer, much more complex than just mother and son. And I think that's healthier for both of us. I'm not depending on him to fill all my emotional needs, so he doesn't feel suffocated by my expectations. And he's not taking me for granted, because he knows I have a full life that would continue with or without his participation. We have boundaries now. Good ones. If he cancels dinner, I don't pretend it's fine if it's not. I say, I'm disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing you. Please don't cancel unless it's truly important. And you know what? He rarely cancels anymore. Because he knows I mean it. Because he knows I won't just smile and nod and enable him to treat me as optional. And when I need to cancel, because yes, sometimes I have other plans, other priorities, he understands. He doesn't expect me to drop everything for him. We've achieved something I didn't think was possible a few years ago. Mutual respect. Equal consideration. A relationship where both people matter. Last month was the 3-year anniversary of my heart attack. Daniel came over alone, without Rachel or the girls. He brought flowers, he'd picked them himself from a farmer's market, not ordered them from a service, and he asked if we could talk. I've been thinking about that day a lot, he said. The day you almost died. And I realized something. I was so angry at Dad for leaving us. I spent my whole childhood hating him for abandoning us, for choosing himself over his family. And then I did the exact same thing to you. Different method, same result. I abandoned you when you needed me most. Yes, I said simply. You did. I want you to know that I understand now. Not just in my head, but in my heart. I understand what you gave me, what it cost you, and how I failed to honor it. And I understand that you changing your will, setting those boundaries, demanding better, that wasn't you being vindictive. That was you finally choosing yourself. And you deserve to be chosen. You always deserve to be chosen. We sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Then he said something that surprised me. I'm grateful for the heart attack. I looked at him sharply, and he held up his hand. I know how that sounds. But I am. Because it woke us both up. It showed you that you deserved better, and it showed me who I'd become. If that hadn't happened, we might have gone on like that forever, me taking you for granted, you accepting it, both of us pretending it was enough. We would have wasted whatever time we had left. The heart attack gave us a second chance. Not just at life, but at actually being a family. He was right. As painful as it was, as terrifying and lonely and devastating as those weeks in the hospital had been, they'd been necessary. Sometimes you have to break completely before you can heal properly. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can build something authentic and lasting. I wouldn't wish a heart attack on anyone. But I wouldn't trade what I learned from mine either. It taught me that I'm stronger than I knew. That I can survive being let down by the person I love most. That I can rebuild my life from scratch and make it even better than before. That it's never too late to choose yourself, to demand respect, to refuse to accept less than your worth. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Don't wait for a crisis to start living authentically. Don't wait until you're in a hospital bed to realize your worth. Don't spend another day making yourself invisible so someone else can shine brighter. You matter. Your needs matter. Your time matters. Your love matters, but only if it's valued by the people receiving it. And if there's someone in your life who treats you like an afterthought, who assumes you'll always be there no matter how little effort they put in, who takes your love for granted, have the conversation. Set the boundary. Demand better. And if they can't rise to meet you, if they can't or won't choose you back, then you have a decision to make. You can keep accepting crumbs, or you can walk away and find people who'll give you the whole feast. I chose the feast. It took a heart attack in a lonely hospital room, and the painful realization that my son didn't care enough to show up, but I finally chose myself. I finally understood that martyrdom isn't the same as love. That sacrifice without reciprocation is just self-erasure. That I could spend my remaining years waiting for someone to choose me, or I could choose myself. And here's the beautiful thing. When I chose myself, Daniel finally had the space to choose me too. When I stopped chasing him, he started coming toward me. When I stopped making excuses for his absence, he started showing up. When I stopped accepting less, he started giving more. But even if he hadn't, even if my boundaries had meant losing our relationship entirely, it would have been worth it. Because I'd found myself. And you can't put a price on that. Today, as I sit here telling you this story, I'm healthy. My heart is strong. My life is full. My relationships are authentic. And most importantly, I know who I am beyond being someone's mother. I'm Margaret Hayes, artist, volunteer, friend, survivor, woman who learned to value herself enough to demand that others value her too. My son visits every week. My granddaughters know their grandmother not as a doormat or a martyr, but as a woman with her own life, her own interests, her own strength. They're learning from me that love isn't about erasing yourself. It's about showing up fully as yourself and expecting others to meet you there. And that letter I wrote in the hospital, the one that was supposed to be read after I died? Daniel asked if he could have it anyway. He wanted to keep it as a reminder, he said. A reminder of who he never wants to be again, and who he's working every day to become. I gave it to him, because that's what you do when someone does the work, when they show up, when they prove they've learned. You offer grace. You acknowledge growth. You celebrate the person they're becoming, even while remembering the pain of who they were. The Margaret Hayes Heart Recovery Room at the hospital has helped over 200 patients now. 200 people who might have been alone in their recovery, who might have felt forgotten and invisible, who instead found community and support and the message that they matter, that their healing matters, that they're worth showing up for. That's my real legacy. Not my house or my savings or my possessions, but the message that every person deserves to be chosen, to be valued, to be seen. The message that it's never too late to choose yourself. The message that love without presence is just a word, but presence without pressure is a gift. So tell me, have you ever felt invisible to someone who should have seen you? Have you ever been taken for granted by someone you've given everything to? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and honoring yourself? If you have, know that you're not alone. Know that there's strength in setting boundaries. Know that demanding better doesn't make you selfish, it makes you wise. Know that the people who truly love you will rise to meet your standards, and the ones who don't, well, they're showing you exactly who they are. Believe them. My heart attack was the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to me. It broke me open, but it also set me free. It showed me who would show up and who wouldn't. It taught me that I could survive disappointment, even from the person I loved most. It gave me permission to finally choose myself. And now, 3 years later, I can honestly say I'm happier than I've ever been. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is real. My relationships are authentic. My boundaries are clear. My life is mine. That's what I left my son that he'll never forget. Not guilt, not shame, not punishment, but truth. The truth that love is an action, not just a feeling. The truth that relationships require reciprocity, not just sacrifice from one side. The truth that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become better than you were. And the truth that the person you most need to show up for is yourself. Did you like my story? Which part moved you the most? Was it when I was alone in that hospital bed, counting ceiling tiles and wondering when I'd become invisible? Was it when Daniel finally understood what he'd done? Or was it when I learned to choose myself, to build a life that was mine, to become someone I could finally look at in the mirror with pride? Tell me in the comments. Tell me if you've ever felt taken for granted. Tell me if you've ever had to set a boundary that hurt but healed. Tell me if you've learned to choose yourself, or if you're still working on it. We're all on this journey together, learning to love ourselves enough to demand that others love us well. And don't forget to subscribe for more life stories like this. Stories of pain and transformation, of broken things made beautiful, of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. Remember, you matter. You're worth showing up for. And it's never, ever too late to start living like you believe it. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.